This video shows you how to graph secant and cosecant. Although these graphs are less commonly used than the sine and cosine graphs that you've already learned how to do, I do want you to know these as well. So the first thing is to recall what you already know about reciprocal functions, because that's the key to graphing both secant and cosecant. So hopefully when I said reciprocal functions, your brain activated what you already know, that secant is 1 over the cosine and cosecant is 1 over the sine. And that's basically how we're going to approach graphing secant and cosecant. So what you see here is a graph of cosine. This is from the iPad graphing calculator, so the units on the x-axis aren't the units I would actually use, but I do like the picture it gives. So here's how we're going to graph the secant function. So let's write that in blue. So we're going to graph y equals secant of x, which is 1 over the cosine of x. So that's a little messy. So let's look at this red graph, because that is the cosine. Well, when the cosine is 1 right here, the secant is 1 over 1, which is also 1. So the secant is also 1 when x is 0. And right here, the cosine is 1/2, which means the secant is the reciprocal of that, or 2. And a similar argument could be made on this side. If the cosine is 1/2, the secant is 2. And as the cosine values become closer and closer to 0, the secant values get larger and larger. And when you hit a cosine of 0, 1 over 0 is undefined, and what that actually results in on your graph is what we call a vertical asymptote, which I'm not so good at drawing here, but it's a dotted line, and you'd have one over here as well. And then once you have those vertical asymptotes drawn in, you can sketch the secant graph, which it isn't really a parabola, but it resembles that in shape. I'm not, again, so great at drawing them. And then you're also going to get a vertical asymptote right here, because the cosine, as you see, the cosine wave crosses the x-axis, which means the cosine is 0. And then a similar argument over here, when the cosine is -1, that would mean the secant was also -1. And when it is let's see, right here, 1/2, then it's 2, or negative, I'm sorry, and when it's here, it's -1/2, so it would be -2, and you get another somewhat parabolic looking shape here, and then you're going to get the same thing over here, and this is just going to repeat. Again, I don't really think my graph is so neatly drawn, so on the next screen, here it is done on the calculator. You see the cosine graph in red and the secant graph in blue. When you do your own graphs, I would like you to sketch in the vertical asymptotes with dotted lines, and I'll show you from start to finish what I expect you to be able to do on the next screen. If you were asked to graph 3 cosecant of 2x, well, what you're always going to do when you have secant or cosecant, first you're going to graph the corresponding sine or cosine wave. In this case, it's sine, because that's the reciprocal of secant. So first of all, I need to pick units. I'm going to say this is pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi, and then same units on this side, negative pi over 2, negative pi, negative 3 pi over 2, and negative 2 pi. And then the sine wave starts at the origin, and this one is going to have a period of pi because of this 2 right here. So the period of 2 pi that you start with gets divided out by that 2, and then so that means it's going to, and it's going to have an amplitude of 3. So, and then down here it's going to go down to negative 3. So you're going, this is one period, and then that pattern is going to repeat. So let's fill that in. This is going to come back up and down, and then like that. Okay, I'm trying to kind of brush this along here, and then it's gonna go, oops, to there, and there, and there, down, and there, and then back up. Okay, so sorry, that took a while. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and graph the cosecant, and it's just a matter of everywhere it crosses the blue line, or the blue graph crosses the x-axis, we need a vertical asymptote because that's where the cosecant is undefined. And then once you have all these asymptotes sketched, you just draw in the reciprocal function like this. And this graph is several periods. When you graph them, I'm going to want you to graph at least 2 full periods. So again, this is a really great way to review what you already know about sine and cosine graphs, because in order to get your secant or cosecant graph, you are going to have to do the sine or cosine graph. Also, please note the vertical asymptotes are actual lines that the graph never reaches. It gets closer and closer and closer, but it never reaches or touches an asymptote. Here are 6 functions for you to practice, 3 secant and 3 cosecant. In every case, what you're going to do is just replace the secant with cosine, or the cosecant with sine, and graph that cosine or sine wave first, and then you base your secant or cosecant graph on that.